We like that? Is that fine?
Yeah.
Hang on. Haha, we're center stage, there we are, okay.
Don't we have some intro music or something like that?
We really should get some intro music, alright.
And then we can't see everybody else.
So this will be the last of our monthly, can everyone online hear us okay?
We can't see them.
Anyone can say yes.
Yes.
You guys,
Yes, thank you. Yes, this will be the last of the monthly task force meetings, and then we'll go to the bi-monthly schedule, with bi-weekly committee meetings. Basically we chose the even number of months to avoid some of the holidays. July 4th would have been close, but that way we'll still get a early December meeting and not have to do a meeting the first week of January, where typically a lot of people aren't back in the office yet. Good afternoon. So I just want to catch up on a couple of quick updates. The +1 ADU grant. So there are 2 rounds of that we're sort of involved in. The round that we were mostly involved in is the one that Repco, I believe, yesterday and today has been announcing or calling the winners and letting them know that they are now awardees. So there are 14 grants being made. I don't know who they're to, Repco does, so they're calling those folks, and they're also going to be sending out notifications to the people that applied and were not awarded. So that's 14 units that'll be going out the door through that grant over the next year and a half or so. There is a round, that's round 3 through the state, but the second round that our county has been involved in, that is ongoing, so Repco has received that funding. I'm not sure if the application period is open yet, but since you can't repeat, the state doesn't allow municipalities to participate in the program twice. So the only 2 municipalities that were left in our county that allow ADUs that didn't participate are Hudson and Taconic, so they'll be participating this next round.
what was the final count on applicants, do we know?
We got 30. Repco received 43 total applications, and then they basically qualified them for minimum requirements of basic requirements, which essentially was completion. Make sure you had all the information that you needed. Out of those 40, I think it was 43, out of those 43, 36 then passed that. So then those 36 were graded based on the supplemental scoring criteria that was in the application. So those were the 100 possible points, or I think it's 120 possible points you could get for things like, will you offer your rental at below market rates? How much of the pre-development work have you done? You know, have you already received planning approval? Those are just the things that give a leg up to those applications. Through the scoring process, some of the feedback that I got was, and this has been the same as it's been across the entire state, according to the HCR meetings that we have every other week. The applicants that scored best were the applicants that had done the most legwork, which is why we kept the application period open for 4 months. It allowed people to get a little extra time to go through some of the building permitting and some of the planning department work. So hopefully there will be some sort of public acknowledgement of who the winners are in the next week or 2.
Chris, onto that subject, what happens to the money if the project can't get completed? I know that everybody tried to score them so that they felt they were completable, but some of them may not be completable.
Yeah, that's an ongoing
They're
conversation.
awarded, so.
Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation with HCR, especially Repco is running a number of these now.
Okay.
I think they've had 3 projects so far that they basically entered into contract with the homeowner, and then it just kind of fell apart. So HCR's response to that has been the reason why most of those projects are falling apart are pretty apparent upfront. So they're now allowing folks to get more pre-development money upfront instead of it being reimbursable. So you're removing some of those unknowns at the beginning of the project with the upfront costs instead of delaying them. I think the delays are what's been the most costly bit for those. That doesn't satisfy your question, no.
I mean, you
Satisfy
couldn't get
me, so I'm gonna
zoning
get
approval or
better.
something.
Yeah, so the what if of,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
Or the price of materials jumped all of a sudden. Which
Yeah,
it
what
has-
if?
It
Yeah.
has already.
And then the round after this, those towns that participated this time could participate the round after this, not the next round.
So there are, yeah, this gets confusing. So there have been 3 rounds of the +1 ADU program. No one in Columbia County participated in round 1. That was in 2022. Round 2 from the state was the one that we're talking about now, that Repco is running for the 21 or 20. municipalities. Round 3 was just awarded to Rupco. But if you were participating jurisdiction in any of the previous rounds,
Right.
you couldn't participate in a successive round. So there were 2 communities that didn't participate for us previously that are participating this round.
And will it be a round 4?
Not unless something changes in the budget, but it was always just projected. They had enough money for 3 years. They intended to run it for 3 years. They would like to run it for more. But they've also been soliciting feedback from the local program administrators about, hey, if we were to change this, how would you change it? And the feedback has been pretty consistent.
And that was my point, if we didn't use some of the money, does it roll into the next phase or
Well,
something?
one of the things that you can do is roll it into some of the other projects. So
Okay,
that was one of their pitches. The really pointed question that they asked us on the last call was, do you think this project would have worked better if we didn't limit the incomes of the homeowners, but did limit what you could then rent the ADUs out for?
The thing we've been saying since the very
A
beginning.
lot of people on the call said yes. Yeah, I think that was the main feedback that they got was a yes, but they've also talked about having a sliding scale of awards, so having 125, which is the award that you got through our grant, having that be the baseline. If you're at 100% of AMI, if you're making a little bit more, you get a little bit less of that grant. If you're making a little bit less, you get a little more of the grant. So then if you're a homeowner who's at 80% of AMI because maybe you're retired, and you want to build an ADU, you'd be able to get a higher amount of the grant funding.
And that's if there's ever a round 4.
If there's a round 4, yeah, it's not gonna change for this round. And they actually asked, well. Okay, I'll tell the story. So they asked us at one point, what if you went back to the awardees and said, oh, we can give you a little more money? It's like, they will lose their minds. I don't think you can open that box again. Because you're basically telling, the previous round awardees, oh, you applied too soon. If you had waited until the next round, then you could have got this extra amount of funding. So if there is a round 4, it won't look like what the first 3 rounds look like, but we don't know what that would look like. And then the other open question is, if there is a round 4, it doesn't even matter to us because all of our jurisdictions that allow ADUs would have participated prior to that.
Yeah,
round.
but well, that's what I'm asking.
Will there be another round that allows jurisdictions that already participated?
Like a
It doesn't
restart.
seem like that was the way they wanted to go. I think they want to get as much coverage across the state as possible.
And that's true for like New York County, New York City, they're not allowed to participate, is that?
That's how it's worded in their RFA, yeah.
And how,
So there's no double dipping in this program.
what qualifies a municipality as having participated? If there's a single applicant from that municipality or?
Yeah, if you were covered, so if your community had sent in a letter of support, right? So if you were allowed to apply in a previous round because of where you lived, you wouldn't be allowed to apply in a successive round.
And how were you allowed to apply? Because the
Where you
municipality
live,
sent a
yeah.
letter of support?
Yeah, so like in the last round, if somebody from the city of Hudson wanted to apply, they wouldn't have been able to because the city of Hudson wasn't one of the or essentially a partner organization. But if they had lived in Greenport, they could.
Will you have access to the Rupco information to do maybe a summary of comment? You mentioned, about renting an apartment below average median income. I mean, would you be able to pull together some of the type of product we're getting from this grant?
Oh, like what the narratives were?
Yeah, I mean, just a rough,
Yeah, and that's actually.
once we know who the awards went to.
Yeah, very often these type of grants, and this one specifically, because part of the application process was you have to sign a waiver that, HCR could come and take photos of your project, so they want to have that narrative, they want to be able to tell you
Right.
these are the sorts of properties that are being built, so I'll see if we can get that sooner than
Yeah,
later.
it would be kind of interesting to see how many of them are renovations, new construction,
that type of thing.
conversion of a different space.
I know they break that out for reporting to HCR, they might not have done it with this round yet, because they
Yeah.
just received list of winners, but they should tabulate all that. All right, so that's grant update number 1. Grant update number 2, the vacant rental improvement program. So just really quickly, a brief summary of what this one was. This is for small landlords. If you own a property that has 5 or fewer units in it, or if it's a property that's vacant that you would like to convert into 5 or fewer residential units, you could apply to whoever the local program administrator of this program was or is. You get $50,000 to rehab, $50,000 per unit for your rehab or conversion costs. If you're going to rent out to someone making 80% or below of AMI, you get 75,000 if you're going to rent out to someone making 60% or below. So Rupco applied for this. They applied for it in a 9-county area. They got the full amount. They were one of 3 organizations or 3 applications that received their full $5 million ask. That was the most that any applicant could ask for. They estimate, if you just kind of do the math of what their expectation is on what the asks will be, they estimate they can do about 80 units between that 9-county service area. This is just on my end, but we've talked about this a few times. If you just do the math based on population, we can reasonably expect, I think, to get somewhere between 6 and 8 units out of the 9 counties. What they told me a while ago, Rupco had on their website for about 2 or 3 months, I think, before they actually received the award, like a pre-screening form. So if you're a landlord and you're interested, let us know. So I know they're working, they've opened up the application period, but they first reached out to those folks that had contacted them first. And I know that they were oversubscribed just from that. So there is an open application window. There's no deadline on it. They basically said, we'll accept applications until all the funds are committed. So we'll just wait to see how long.
Are there similar restrictions on income for landowner, income for?
Not on this one, no. Yeah, there's no income restriction for the landlords. They can only own a certain amount of properties across the state. And then again, the properties that are funded, the properties that are subsidized with this grant, can't have more than 5 residential units in them.
And
They can be mixed use.
so the minimum grant amount is 50,000 for an 80% of AMI renter.
Right, if you're just gonna do 1 unit,
For what period of time?
10 years.
And is that application up on like Rupco site? or
Yep, yeah, it's on their website.
Just look for
Under
viewer,
their,
probably.
it's on their home ownership tab.
I just wonder if that's a press release. That's
That this is
something we should
open?
be thinking about from a press release perspective.
So there's a update on here I didn't include because I missed my deadline, so hopefully this will get out next week. One of the things that we wanted to do this month was put a newsletter out. I had 2 audit deadlines and a grant deadline last week, so my newsletter got pushed a little bit. It was much more important to get money than it was to put this newsletter out, but it'll go out next week. I asked Rupco if they wanted me to advertise this program in the newsletter, and they said, that's fine. This is one of those things where, you want to get the news out there to let people know that this is available, but you also want to temper their expectations of, hey, this program might already be so oversubscribed that, going through the application process, kind of setting you up for disappointment. But you never know, maybe somebody has an amazing project, or maybe someone needs much less than the 50,000 is willing to accept that. So it'll go in the newsletter. And then if the funds aren't, if we don't hear from Rupco that the funds are fully committed, within the next, I guess, would be 5 weeks. There's a multi-town, the Rojan Housing Committee is hosting an event on May 10th at the library. So that'll be part of my presentation if the funds aren't committed. But it'll be in the newsletter, Rupco is doing their own social media, so we can kind of ride their coattails in that. But I think on this one, we take our cues from them just because there's no guarantee that we would get any, right? That 7 is just me doing the math of this is what we would get if the applications were evenly distributed.
7 units. So
I think it's
like
gonna be between 6 and
one building and maybe like another
a little bit of another
two-family.
one. Yeah, so they don't have to be 5 units, they can be any size.
Right.
I think most of the applications are probably going to be, 2-family home that someone lives in 1 floor, 1 unit, and then they wanna rent the other one out.
Well, just from an optics perspective, I'm a little concerned that if we've worked on a grant program with Rupco, assuming that we have, and by the time we're ready to talk about it publicly, it's completely oversubscribed, then it starts to feel very much like if you're not in the know, you're not getting, you're not feeding at the trough of the government kind of thing, and I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what their marketing strategy was like for that. We're still gonna they asked us to wait until they knew that they were going to get the award, because they had the landlord interest screening form up before grant was even made to them. It was in case we get this money, here's a program that might be available.
Yeah,
And even during that period, it sounded like they were oversubscribed.
yeah.
And is it clear when you go to their website that Columbia County is part of it?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. There's I don't, the +1 when, well, that one's closed now, but when they were running the ADU program concurrently in multiple counties, each county had its own application. This application, there's just two, they're doing 9 counties, so they just have one portal for it, but they tell you, you know, if you live in this area.
Right, as long as it's,
region.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I know
Columbia's
they're all
listed in
over
the
the place.
counties they're serving.
Want to make sure the folks, when they go to the website, they can.
Yeah, it's clear to
Yeah,
you that, yeah.
I guess it's not clear to me that any landlord in Columbia County who's trying to pay attention to, you know, kind of how they can improve their housing stock is even aware of RUPCO and all the various programs that RUPCO might be working on. So I wonder if that's something we could just get a little more in front of.
Okay.
I don't know.
There is part of that program, and this was something that we've talked about at land bank board meetings. The land bank's mission is to, you know, get vacant buildings, vacant abandoned and tax delinquent properties back online, but it also has a further stated mission of facilitating affordable and workforce housing. So part of the concept of this next round of land bank funding is using some of the rehab money to deepen the affordability of the VRIP funds. So somebody wasn't going to go for the, you know, the 75,000 for the 60% because the math doesn't work out for them. Maybe if the land bank funds can do probably, you know, like a 50% match or so. So I think that will give those applicants a leg up. RUPCO also administers the Sullivan County Land Bank, and they think they're going to do something similar. They really like that idea. But then it also, you know, that sort of opens the window to, well, if HDR is okay with land bank funds being used that way, and there are no programs out there for people that own, you know, 1 family or 2 family home, and they just need you know, $50,000-$60,000 to fix the place up and get somebody in it. Why couldn't we use land bank money to do that? So that's a conversation that I think is kind of ongoing between the board and the state. But we just asked them for money, so we'll wait a little bit before we poke them again. All right, move on to committee work really quickly. So, well, moving on will be quick, but the conversation won't be quick. So part of the idea of having some space between our meetings, both the monthly meetings and then the committee meetings, is for the committee meetings to become a little bit more meaningful, and the work that happens in between them, having some space to actually happen. And then using the monthly meetings for everyone to sort of come together and talk about what each other have done. Now, outreach hasn't met yet, but there are a few things that the outreach committee's got on its plate. So the next outreach committee meeting is now April 14th, so the week after next. And that'll be, I think, a final look at, or maybe a penultimate look at the language for the workforce survey. Before we release that out into the world, hopefully in May. I really don't want to get into the summertime before that goes out. But then there's kind of this larger project that came up in both the policy and pre-development committee meetings over the past few weeks that I think each committee is going, we really sort of put this together in the pre-development committee meeting this week. The question that I've been asking the committees is, all right, if we have this space to do this work, you know, what is the work that you want to do? Like the actual, here's something that has a deliverable result that we can talk about at the next committee meeting, at the next task force meeting, like something that's actually kind of project based. In policy and pre-development, somewhat unbeknownst to each other, there is some overlap between the memberships, but it was actually 2 members who do not share committee assignments who sort of brought up the same conversation was, let's get an inventory of the parcels. And we talked about this a little bit, but I think this is more now, it's all sort of pieces of a whole that we can break up into our own buckets of work on. Let's get an idea of the parcels that are out there throughout the towns and the villages that are potentially developable and not in like a whole, you know, just driving around, finding a vacant lot and saying, hey, that looks like it could be 13 houses. You know, what are some actual opportunities throughout the communities? And then in pre-development, that was an idea that came out of policy, but doing it in a really organized way. And then in pre-development, this is something that Dennis has been sometimes obliquely and sometimes very pointedly advocating for a while. Let's do a sort of a pilot project of this is the type of housing that could, you know, potentially be developed on a parcel. So the idea is get an inventory, you know, pick two or three or four parcels that have some sort of differences between them, so you can see like a typical parcel that's, you know, on a corner lot, a typical parcel that's 3 acres versus 6 acres, whatever your, I guess, most typical general types are. And then work through what different housing typologies would look like on that parcel, so whether it's a single family, whether it's a duplex, maybe it's, you know, 4 units in a condo or something. And then I think we further sort of refine this towards the end of pre-development. It would be a lot easier to do this if we could talk to multiple towns at the same time, which is a concept that we've been talking about, as well as trying to, I guess, not facilitate, but trying to certainly help more of the towns form these mini coalitions like the Rojan Housing Task Force. So the idea that came out of that committee was to specifically go to the folks at Rojan who have been working on this issue for a while. So you've got 3 towns at once. Ask for each of the towns to identify, you know, 2 to 3 parcels, not the Rojan school. So apologies to Meredith if she watches this later. Some parcels that could be some sort of, you know, missing middle housing or some sort of small to moderate development. And then we'll work through what those different typologies look like. So here's your duplex, here's your triplex. Here are the funding sources available for these different kinds of housing developments. And just as importantly, what funding sources do we not have? So what's missing from a capital stack, right? Do we have anything out there that we can apply for that helps subsidize new septic? Or is that something that is missing? The spoiler, it's missing. But if we can go out there and say, we would be able to do this type of housing, you know, if not for, you know, the scarcity of these resources, I think it'll help us make a case that rural housing is much more difficult to do than I think a lot of folks in Albany realize. And if we can come to them with case studies and say, here's housing that the community would like to see, and we're ready to do it, we just are missing, you know, these 1 or 2 key pieces. So that was the pitch for the project. That might be new to some folks because not everybody's in 2 committees.
That's kind of a tough rope to, I rope and walk here. If the community's not ready, hasn't had those conversations completely, to just ride around and all of a sudden say, what do you think, guys, over here? Now you're talking about planning board and town officials and that.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, they hear all of a sudden,
Yeah, just.
the housing task force wants to fix, this is where we should be doing this.
Right.
And you've taken the whole thing.
So it's not
But
saying
it's
we
just- I'm
think
just saying,
we
this is
should
what
be
we've
doing it.
avoided at the county planning board for years and years.
I think you're
Trying to duck.
you're way ahead
The
of
appropriate
Yeah.
what
time.
we're thinking of. I'll let Dennis has done something similar to
We
this. I'll let him
did
present it.
something similar to this, with Hillsdale. This is pre-COVID, when they're, Brenda and I, when we were working on Habitat houses. And this is pre-COVID, and the housing, we're asking, you know, what are the nuts and bolts of developing affordable housing? And we recommended that we would, you know, take a parcel that the owner would be willing to allow us to just do a hypothetical case study on. And Harrington's offered an unused parking lot, you know, as an example. And we laid out, you know, a quick sketch study of where these units would go. And not, you know, it's not huge numbers.
Yeah.
We're talking about, you know, 2 to 6 units. And we gave them a sense of how much it would cost and what kind of funding, in this case, it would be Habitat, what kind of funding Habitat would have available to them, you know, to build it. And the reason was because I think, Ron, you said a lot of people we want affordable housing, but we don't want it in our backyard. And we wanted to give people confidence that it's not as scary as you think, you know, that there are pockets that are, you know, underdeveloped that could be, you know, actually look better, and your property values will go up if they're developed, and, you know, just kind of give them more than just, you know, just give them actually something to visualize. It's not that, in that case, it was purposely hypothetical, so nobody would pitchfork and say, I don't want a project there. Everybody kind of relaxed and said, this is just, you know, an example. And I think, you know, I think it did end up helping Habitat get other projects, because people were, you know, especially because we were testing the 0 lot line idea, where you have a semi-attached unit, and a lot of towns were afraid of, you know, that idea, and when they could see that it wasn't as scary as all that, I know it helped them get other lots in other towns, so.
It just, so I understand, the case study basically said, you know, here's a lot, here's a sketch of what we might put on that lot, here's about what it's gonna cost. Here's where we think we can get some funding for, here's where the gaps might be.
Right.
So just kind of like,
Right.
you know, answers the question, how would we do this?
Right, exactly right.
Okay.
And for Habitat, one big gap was somebody has to donate the land, right? And it wasn't a big stretch, you know, and ultimately later on, somebody said, well, I could give you, you know, 3 acres, you know, but nobody thought that their 3 acres could make that much of a difference, you know, or in Hillsdale, it was learning that even though they had public water and sewer, they didn't have enough capacity to build housing, you know, even if all the other pieces were in, so they would have to increase their capacity. So it actually made all those issues much more just, you know, actionable, or just, you know, they could talk about them and kind of come up with a solution.
Yeah, I wanna be clear that the idea is not to go to towns with a proposal to build. You know,
Right.
The idea is if you, say you have a matrix of 12 properties that you've gone and looked at, and these are the 3 most common stumbling blocks, well, now you know what we need help with, right? And they've got this cross section of different geographic areas, but also just different features of those given parcels.
You
You
know,
know, and the truth is, there's not enough money that's gonna come from the state. I mean, there's just never gonna be enough. So these towns have to be more creative about how to find the funding, so.
yeah, and if I can just switch, Chris, real quick, because there is some action going on. So I know Stockport is about to approve something. And, you know, it's a few acres and it's right off of Route 9. And I know for a fact, as you folks do, because the builder has approached us in the past, they would like to put something on that it's units they would build, but that even first-time homeowners could be able to afford. So I don't think I think there's already some progress, but I think they would still benefit from sitting down before they actually start to draw up their plans and say, what is the best thing to do? Now that we've got approvals and we are gonna do it.
Where
what's
you've
the
got a
best
real
thing?
scenario,
Right.
what you're talking about. you know,
Right.
and-
Well, we met with them, what, 3 or 4 times?
A few times, yeah.
Okay, good.
And from months ago, right? And
Yeah.
and we've helped them find professional services. We've worked with the chairman, on the fact that it has water and sewer.
Yeah.
But, you know, I may have mentioned it the last time, but the project down in Orange County where the guy contributed the land. And, they're building 28, single-family units. They can only be purchased by people who, are first-time home buyers. The state put $5 million into it under the AHOP program. And the homes are costing $420 to build, and they're gonna sell them for $260.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
So the models are out there.
Narratives that give people some hope.
Yeah, and
you
then,
know?
and other people are doing it. You know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you do something.
But I think people do like to see something on a real piece of land that they can
Right.
relate to.
Well,
Otherwise, I
but we-
think they're afraid that towns will change too much, that their block will change too much.
We did this with,
Oh, yeah.
it's on both sides. It's for the developer to get the best, of Carson. And it's for the neighbors to see what you're getting. Town of, Taconic School District wanted to take 10 acres across the street from the school. So we paid $2,500 and hired Crawford to draw something up. And, you know, the new superintendent came in and she's not ready to focus on that, but, it was 64 units. Then they said they only wanted to sell them or rent them to people who work there. I said, well, if you you can violate the fair housing laws. We won't get into that, but they gotta see it. And I just got off a call, about a potential project. And again, you know, should we have 50 units or 250 units? And I said, let's talk about 50 first, because if someone hears that you're gonna build 250 in one of the towns in this county,
Okay.
where it
Yeah,
has
chase
water and
out,
sewer, you know, they'll be.
And to your point, the developer gets feedback without spending a dime.
Yeah.
You know, they can just observe how the housing committees or whoever invited to the meeting react, you know, and so if 65 was going to be no way, you might have a sketch that has 15, and people would say, I have no problem with 15. And then the developer could say, well, I could make it work, you know, if it's this money and that much, you know, I think it's the delta that we need to get to.
But like with the
On that
Hillsdale,
particular project, did they identify some funds at a particular?
No, because they're not sure how they want to do it yet, and, you know,
Okay, so they're still working
is
through.
it gonna be rental, is it gonna be purchase, is it gonna be, you know, so you gotta define what you wanna do before you can figure out if there's a program for it.
I'm thinking, I'm hearing now they want to build houses.
Right, there was one that,
First.
look at, Cagno wanted to build houses, they wanted to rent them, so there's people.
Yeah, not, right, I get that.
And there's less money there's no real state, other than the AHOP program
As is homeownership though, yeah.
for home ownership. The state's not promoting home ownership.
Yeah, that's not a great idea. I guess that's my point. So if there's
Yeah.
nothing, at least we know there's.
Well, but
nothing.
if he builds them for market, you still open up housing for other people, because the people who are renting,
You do,
Yeah.
you do, but it's,
Yeah.
again,
and we're still trying to push the project, on the 38 acres behind, car dealership at Galbauer Road and Route 66.
oh, is that right?
So there's, you know,
Oh, right.
we have a list of 20 people we're talking to about actual projects, so this is all good feedback for
Wait,
us.
is that land that's already,
Is that on the Clavert side or the Kent side?
The
Clavert
side. It's, they bought it, put a gas station, and then when they found out, after they bought it, that the town had already changed before they closed, that was no longer a site that could be, it was zoned, no longer zoned for gas station. I was trying to either convince them to do housing, or to do a private, commerce centers that would complement the county's commerce center across the street without the county having to get into the business of
Right.
expanding the commerce center.
Yeah, the other thing it's good for is myth busting.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of people, you know, one case study that revealed if you were only gonna do 6 units and you had enough land to scatter them along the road, as opposed to a cul-de-sac with 6 units around it in a shared septic system, it's $100,000 less per unit to scatter them along the road. So, you know, everybody has this idea that, oh, it must be cheaper, you know, to do them around a cul-de-sac with a shared system. But it was $100,000 more per unit to take that approach.
But anytime you take a developable lot, if you would, and you need to put in any type of a road, that usually chews up most all the profit that you can put, you know, get out of selling. If you're talking about doing 6 or 10 houses a day.
Right, plus it's upfront costs,
Right,
right?
but if you've got road frontage, it's easy, you know, but if you
Yeah.
need to develop a road,
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
Every municipality is gonna say, build it to town specs and we'll take it, you know, but that costs.
But they have
And
you
you
have
say
a lot
all
of
the
comprehensive,
profit you got.
ours is bringing the town specs to the income.
you have a lot of comprehensive plans that are designed assuming the wrong thing sometimes.
I mean, we had a discussion on it, something I still wanna do, I just haven't had the staff time to do it. And let's go out and, we have the tax records, we can find, anyone that has 4 to 6 units. And, you know, there's one on the way into Philmont, and, you know, 2-story with 6 units in it, there's one going out on, down in Livingston up on the hill. Hey, if you're making money with 4 or 6 units, do you have enough money to plan to put 4 more up, right? And, you know, they're not all going to be in, 45 to 100 unit apartment houses, because we don't have the infrastructure to support it.
Right.
And then what Supervisor Not often talks about is the money to help people, maintain their houses so they don't fall into disrepair to the point where a vulture comes in, buys them and flips them at twice the price.
I still think we have a lot of housing stock that we can fix around here. We're gonna do that in my own house, my own town, is just to try and really identify all the ones that are sitting there vacant that could be, you know, fixed up and, you know, whether it's banks or,
But the work you've all done has really raised the awareness of people, and the work that, Chris has done with the supervisors on the
Right.
pro housing. I mean, people are talking about it,
yeah.
and,
exactly, yeah.
you know, we're getting,
There's no magic bullet, right? But,
and you
Well,
get 10
But I
projects to
think
get
the
one.
case study is a great way to show supervisors and kind of all the stakeholders. This is complicated, And, you know, right now, there's $180,000 to $200,000 gap between what a person making AMI can afford and what the average home costs. And in an environment where it's $500 a square foot to build, this is what it looks like. So it's an ugly pizza, but it's the pizza. So
Right,
let's
right.
figure out, how do we change the baking process a little
Right.
bit so that we've got, you know, we can start to, okay, if we can get the land donated, that's great. If we have to build it close to a sewer connection because that reduces cost, you know, all of those things.
Yeah.
Cause we have to start getting to those answers, cause otherwise we are back to square one, which is it
Otherwise-
costs more to build a house
Right.
than the average person can afford.
Or you just some policy talk.
Yeah.
You know, and it invites partners. I think people will come to the table if they see something could actually come of it.
Well,
Nobody
it's
wants
sort
to
of-
sit around for 3 years.
Well, see, exactly, right, that's sort of the meta point of the whole thing, it's, okay, well. But this project is the housing task force's version of, you know, that's our side of that, it's like, okay, here's something we can sink our teeth into and actually, you know, this is real work, we can chart the progress of this. And I do wanna say, the only reason that we would want to start with the Rojan Housing Task Force is, to Tim's point, these are 3 towns that have been talking about this for a while, so. They actually have come to us with parcels, so this will be a little bit more organized. But I think that will actually go in another direction, where if this is, you know, if this is a public project that we're working with 3 towns who are already collaborating. Other towns around the county might look at that and say, hey, that's a pretty good idea, maybe the 3 of us. But we already let Taconicus made some overtures to some of their neighbors to see if they'd like to collaborate.
I think that's one of the keys that Dennis mentioned, is that you had a willing parcel, you know, owner to say, use this as an example, because. To Tim's point, you know, you're gonna get a lot of people excited if you just go around and go, that looks like a good lot, you know?
Right.
We tried that when I first got here.
That didn't work out.
We sent Ed Steffler out, I
Yeah.
said, find 5 parcels in Greenport that you could put multifamily
Not hard to
housing.
do, but.
Within 2 hours, I had people calling me up, what the hell are you doing?
Right, yeah.
Right, no, yeah, you definitely have to have, you know, where the whole town understands, you know, the landowner is participating, it's hypothetical, and
It's hypothetical,
you know,
right.
like.
The other thing is, I think we gotta realize that affordable housing is gonna look different in different towns. I gotta tell, I mean, right now, we're going through this public comment time for our zoning. I just looked through the proposal, I don't think the town board has reacted to the proposal yet. We don't have design standards in our town, except for if it goes through for multifamily and senior housing. And it'd be pretty tough to meet them. So I think you got a better chance, and I'm gonna ask Denal maybe later to talk about what his community's doing with this 3/4 acre parcel subdivision one time. That may be something that the town of Austerlitz, being more rural in nature, maybe like Canaan and that, is able to help folks with. I think it might be more acceptable and actually much more doable, but I think you got a good idea, it's just, I'd be hesitant. I
Do
mean,
you know, you have SLEs, right?
What?
Austerlitz has SLEs, don't they?
What, you have
The
what?
single lot exemptions, does Austerlitz have those?
No,
Oh, you don't, okay.
no, I don't think anybody does.
Supervisor, do you know if you're pioneering that in the county? The child lots? This is Supervisor Collins, sorry.
Right.
You talking to me, Chris?
Yes, sir. Do you know if you're pioneering the child lots in the county?
I can't lay claim to that, but I haven't heard of it, but I haven't researched every municipality's zoning. We did it, you know, spot checks with STR laws and things like that for benchmarks, but see,
Okay.
towns like Ghent, they already have a smaller single minimum lot size, right?
Smaller than what?
We have 10 and 5, and then
Oh, yeah,
3.
Yeah.
You have
We're
2
smaller
acre
than that.
minimum lot size, so you already have what we're trying to achieve. But if
Yeah,
we
we have
mention
2 and 5.
changing our minimum lot sizes, people will go crazy.
Yeah, it's actually not 2 and 5, it's 1 and 3, but the density is 2 and 5, it's a little complicated,
Okay.
but.
But then Denal is good, you're gonna allow, I don't know how you made out your public hearing, but we saw at the county planning board a proposal for 3/4. 3/4 of an acre parcel one time,
Yeah, 3/4 to 2 acres, that's the range.
right?
But the only thing is, and I mentioned it during the process, is we should be allowed to put 2 single family dwellings on one of those. But right now it's just restricted to 1. And Chris also submitted that input as well. So it's one single family dwelling. I'd like to see a little more density than that, but the town board as a voting block, I don't think we could get a lot more density out of those single lot exemptions. But maybe we'll go back for two single family dwellings on one lot, a two family
Yeah.
dwelling.
I think the only reason I called that, if I'm remembering this correctly, I think the only reason I called that out was the three residential districts where you could do the child lots allowed two families by special permit.
Just a use permit, yep.
Right, okay, I got that right. Go me. So I do have everybody's zoning, so I can find out if you are the pioneer. I'll look tomorrow. I'll take some time.
I'll get you- get you
If you're not on public water and sewer, you have to have 3/4. You might have to.
I was gonna say, really,
Yeah.
more like 2 acres, I
Well,
didn't.
maybe more. Yeah, I go back to when me and my wife moved up here, we originally were on a 1 acre parcel. But there was a huge ravine in back and the parcels next to us were not gonna be developed. And it's with the shale and crud that we have in our area, and it's not hard not to develop. So, but then eventually we bought one, almost 2 acres to add to that. But we started off with 1 acre, and that was, we did the well, you know, you do it. I mean, whoever does it, when they go to the planning board, is gonna have to do a site plan. There's no way around it. Because you need to take it in.
But back then, you didn't have to put your well as far away from the septic.
Right, yeah, you gotta take your regs down,
And the septic didn't have to be what it has.
We did it in 78, the house was built, so 79 they started doing building permits, so.
Yeah.
So I think just to kind of, I would love to walk away from monthly housing task or bi-monthly task force meeting with some solid next steps. So I think reaching out to Rojan is the next one. I don't know when they meet again. I think their meetings are bi-monthly or they might just be quarterly. But we know there's a housing committee at each of those towns. So each of those municipalities have someone to speak to about this. We can let them know what we're thinking, maybe before we start asking them to identify parcels, just let them know, hey, here's a project that we're thinking about collaborating with you on. Are you interested?
The case study project.
Case study project.
I'd be happy to sit in that conversation with you, and I know you will too.
Yeah, and some of them have already saw the work that Brenda did, so they might, just see this as repeating what, in a different way, but picking up on what they did with Brenda.
A lot of the folks that we would want to talk to will be at that May 10th meeting. So I'll circulate information on that. It's Saturday afternoon. I think it's gonna be at the Rojan Library, but I've gotta double check.
Is that the housing, it's like a housing? May 10th. I don't have that.
Okay.
What's May 10th?
They might not have sent it around yet.
I don't, but
it's-
you will, right?
Yeah, I don't think they've got any marketing for
Is that
it.
Rojan is doing
I
that?
believe it's the Rojan Housing Task Force is doing it. Yeah, I believe the library's the location, but I'll confirm that tomorrow. I'll be presenting at that in some capacity. I don't know which hat I'll have on.
One development that I keep going back to is looking pretty successful, is that one just outside of Elation. I remember when we were doing our first zoning document, right, just before you go across the bridge on the left-hand side.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They were selling houses quicker than they could get the road paved, finish it.
Yeah.
And you look at it, I mean, it looks like the folks got off to a good start, looks, everything kept like it's affordable.
So the individual houses on the left,
On the
where you're
left, it's just a
facing
straight, yeah.
the town?
Yeah,
Okay. Because there's another one on the right.
yeah, but that's more of
The same
a.
development.
Like a senior.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's some sort of.
Ride offer, I think it is.
Yeah, something like that.
But
And it's
that-
subsidized. I
It
think.
is.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, those are amazing, and they went up starting about 25 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a different time.
Little Falls or.
People going in to buy those were young families starting.
Yeah.
out. I
But
mean,
some were sooner than that. Some
Some were,
Yeah.
were
Well, they did it in 2 or 3 phases.
after,
more recently.
yeah, I'm saying it's going back
Yeah, yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
the term.
But I think to your point, the road was put in when it was portable.
It was.
You know what I mean?
Well, I put
So that's the thing.
now.
Well, and that, I mean, not for nothing, but for all these grants, for all these programs, some talk at the top about making it a little easier to develop wouldn't hurt either.
Well,
I mean, if the
also,
cost of permitting and the cost of doing all these things remains so prohibitive, what's the grant really doing for
That might be something that we find out with the case study, right? That, oh, we wouldn't be able to
Yes.
do this if it wasn't for this particular aspect of your zoning or whatever the case may be.
Again, I also think the case study would help because I think developers, it's not the cost of the permitting. It's the fear that they would have invested 3 years in the permitting and then being told no.
Okay,
So the case study might help in that regard, because you would have, somebody that, if you have, an example of, this is what was proposed, this was the reaction, this was total cost. And so it would be just to give them a little bit more confidence that the town had already considered something of this scale, so.
yeah, I mean, what else can you do for confidence?
Well, you really have to have buy-in from the community.
Yeah.
So that's, at the end of the day, they
Well,
have to.
I knew a developer in another place who proposed 750 units, I said, what do you think? He said, well, I want 250, so I think, work my way down.
Yeah.
That's a pretty typical stance.
And I think he got none, right?
Yeah.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, yeah. The people were like, get out.
I mean, I guess, I think if you're.
It's only 1,500
So I
cars
think
a
the
day.
answer is that. That wasn't what stopped people when they built in the 60s and 70s. Okay, it was, oh, there's land and there's a need for housing.
Right, I can afford to do it. yeah.
Let's
Right.
build some housing.
But they
But
thought it
the
was
time
expensive
was
then
cheaper.
too.
Time was cheaper in the 60s.
Everything was cheaper.
Everything was cheaper. So,
Money was cheaper.
But there was less
So right
regulations,
now,
that's the huge thing.
Well,
I mean, developers.
But the regulation isn't the hard part. It really
It's
isn't.
the
I mean,
enforcement.
right now, it's really not the hard part.
It's the hardest.
It's the cost of development.
Well, no doubt.
And that's not really driven by regulation so much. I mean, it's not,
No.
That's material.
I was on the planning board, what is now, 10 years ago, when building costs were half what they are now.
See,
It was easier.
yeah,
I mean, it's the same problem with rental units. Like, we can invoke developers all we want to say, come and build these units, even if we could get the community to agree with it. But when they build at $500 a square foot, they cannot rent it for $1,000 a unit.
Right.
It just can't be done
You
from
have to have a
a.
return on investment, I don't care how you do it.
and on the homeownership, single family homeownership side for developers, all the profit is in the land. So if you, in the 60s and 70s, if you could buy land for 3,000 an acre and then subdivide it, you could just, the housing costs was a pass-through.
Mhm.
Because you were getting the return on the land.
Mhm.
But now, a 20-acre parcel is worth more per acre than a 5-acre parcel. Because it's the reverse now, people want larger parcels, so they can't make any money on the land, on the return for the land. So it's those kind of things that you need to, like, I think case studies help to reveal. And, and then, so if the developer can't make the money on the land, then you have to start thinking about ways to, help them, get infrastructure, subsidies and help them. And that money can come from a lot of different sources. It can come from the DEC, there's a lot of different sources that piece it together. And most likely the ones that will be most interested are less concerned about the profit and more willing to, invest for a goodwill return. There's something that they get out of it, more than just,
Well, I think that's this project in Stockport. They're just very interested. I mean, they got a turn of profit, but I think, but that's very hard to find.
Well, the people who live here and see that their schools are closing, and see that they can't get a plumber, and they can't get an electrician, and they have these,
Firemen.
I mean, that goodwill pays back. It's just,
Speaking of school closings, so there was a recent tranche of census data released. It's the vintage county data, and it has to deal with people moving into and out of your county and the population change just based on natural factors like births and deaths. Of the 62 counties in New York State, we are number 58 in birth rate per capita. We are number 6 in deaths per capita, or it was 6. It was pretty high.
Yeah, we're approaching median age 60.
Yeah, we're great.
Yeah, we're
That's what
we'll be
somebody
55 at some point.
Some
But
of us are
part of that
growing
is we're
faster
getting
than
older,
others.
and part of that is you're just losing younger folks.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, I want to open up to, if anybody's got any comments from the Zoom audience. No? Any final comments in the room?
Yeah, I just wanna say, and I think you touched on it, but I would like to drive the point home. If we're gonna meet every 2 months, we all have to take homework and do it.
Yeah.
We can't go through this, it's so important, so. You know, regardless of how you feel about the every 2 months versus every month, I think what this means is now the committee members have to carry a little more weight. And so I would implore all of my fellow committee members to take some of the weight off of Chris's shoulders and figure out what we can do next to help. Okay.
Not.
When there's homework, when there's homework, there's usually a teacher, and so Chris is gonna have to be the teacher,
Yeah.
assign it and correct
He
it.
knows, he's forgotten more than I'll ever know about housing, so if he wants to be the teacher, I'll learn.
Thank you.
All right, so we do not meet again in this room for another 2 months. And then I'll send out the next couple of committee invitations for the next couple of days.
Great,
Thanks, everyone.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone. How are you, Dennis? Good to see you in person. Haven't seen you in a while.
I was gonna answer your email. Hi, Chris. This is great. I'll take care of it.
Take care. I've been talking with